with all due respect.
Hey, we're Josh Ortegon and Gray Gaines, and this is With All Due Respect, the show where we keep it real about health, fitness, and performance. From weight loss to sports development, we're covering the conversations that matter.
Follow us on Instagram at Phenom Fitness, PHNM Fitness, and visit www.phenomfit.com to check out our training programs, coaching, and gear built for real results. Let's get into it.
All right, guys, with all due respect, we are back on what I'm going to call the Gray Tour.
I'm never going to live this down, ever.
The Gray's going to have a baby tour that we're doing. And guys, I told Gray when we first launched this around fertility, we have had one episode around male fertility. I was all in for. I got it. Ever since then, I'm kind of the learning. I'm learning here. I'm learning, and I love it. I love being involved in this. I love the fact that doesn't seem like there's always a lot of guys that are highly interested in this, but this has been fascinating. And today we have Lisa Hendrickson-Jack on. Thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate. I'm always respectful. You're busy. You're a busy person, and I'm glad we found a time to get this on. Gray, if you can kind of explain how you came around to see her, what interests her, and then Lisa, like I said before we started this podcast, after reading your bio, I think I need you to explain what you do.
Yeah. Well, there's so much to it. And that's what I found really interesting about your content, because you can go on Instagram and you can search, fertility awareness. You can search PCOS. You can search menstrual, like all of these different things pop up. But the cool thing about your page is you encompass so many of that in one go. And I think that's very, very important. And I found your content to not only be educational in a sense where like I can understand it, but also in depth, which I think was really, really cool. And so the reason I hand selected you, it was like, okay, menstrual cycle talk is very interesting. And I can't remember a time where I've ever had like a lengthy conversation with my doctor about my menstrual cycle. I think regular questions are like, how long does it last? What's the flow like? But there's not a ton of question around menstrual cycle. And I think what you bring into the equation is like you are educating around tracking your menstrual cycle and in depth and how that can prepare you for something like fertility. So yeah, I thought this was a very great addition to our current series that we're into. And if you want to explain a little bit more in depth what you do, we would love to hear it.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Of course, I've been talking about menstrual cycles for over 20 years. I'm a certified fertility awareness educator, and I came across this work quite young, actually. I was around 18 years old. So my very first period was quite heavy and was painful. And like many women back then, so this would have been in the 90s, I went to my doctor, and within like 2 words, I got a prescription for the birth control pill. And at some point, I wasn't using it for birth control at the time. And so at some point I figured, even though I didn't have any knowledge at that time, I figured it wasn't normal. I was about 10, I think, when my mom had a hysterectomy because she had fibroids and she would bleed a lot. And she would have, when she would have her period, she would kind of have to lay down like a tablecloth and stuff like that. And then she had a hysterectomy, and my aunt came to visit, and I learned that she had had a hysterectomy too. So I kind of had this experience in my mind, like, that's not what I want. I don't want to be losing my uterus at 40, right? This is not the future that I want for myself. So I didn't really know anything, but when I was probably 17, 18, I decided to come off the pill and just kind of see what was going to happen because I wanted to figure it out. And it was around that time that I discovered fertility awareness. There was a group on my campus that was teaching charting, and so I started attending. And I had actually my very first encounter with it. There was a woman who wrote a very interesting book. The title of the book is CUNT, an actual book. She's like a poet. And she was reading an excerpt from this book. And I remember she mentioned that she learned that she could, tell where she is in her cycle from tracking her mucus and finding her cervix, and that sent me on a whole rabbit hole. So I went to our women's center. I bought Taking Charge of Your Fertility. So I was actually, that was my first exposure to charting, Taking Charge of Your Fertility. And then I found this group on campus who was teaching it. And then a group of us ended up taking a certification. But this was in like the early 2000s, before the interwebs were like this, before there was social media. So I didn't know that it could be a career. I mean, I knew it could be a career, but I was like, how am I going to find clients, right? So this was kind of my late teens, early 20s experience. I had learned charting for personal reasons. We were teaching it at a grassroots level. And then fast forward to when I was married and I had my first son, that's when I kind of learned about podcasts before people knew what they were. So in 2014, I started the very first fertility awareness podcast. So, for many years, what I was doing was I was teaching women about charting. And for anyone who's not familiar with that, there's a whole lot that I'm sure we'll get into, but you can't get pregnant as a woman every single day of your cycle. There's actually a short fertile window from a scientific standpoint, about 6 days long. And you can learn how to track that. A lot of people hear that and they think the rhythm method, it's ineffective, but we have a lot of science. That's a lot of what you were talking about that I share on my page and in my books and in my work. So, we do have evidence-based methods with high efficacy rates where you can actually track your cycle, use it as birth control. And when you're trying to conceive, it's really helpful because you can't get pregnant every day. So it's really important to understand, when is the right time for timing. And then, of course, my first book, the title of it is The Fifth Vital Sign. And I'm arguing that the menstrual cycle is a vital sign. And when we get into the weeds of the menstrual cycle and we learn what a normal menstrual cycle looks like, then you can very quickly see that when women have cycles that are outside of that normal range, or when we have, issues of irregular bleeding or irregular cycling or a variety of other issues that can arise, those are correlated with other health conditions in many cases. And so similar to how you may be able to go to a doctor, they measure your blood pressure and it's too high. And it's not just general that it gives some general information. If it's too high, that something's going on, but it also allows the doctor to kind of get to the short list of what could cause high blood pressure. So when we see certain cycle issues, when you're working with someone who understands that, there is kind of like a short list of like, well, why would you have irregular cycles? And that can lead you to some really important insights about what's happening health-wise. So currently, my main focus is on our practitioner program. So I now teach women's health practitioners to use the menstrual cycle as a vital sign. So we certify them to teach charting and also to take it to a next level to be able to actually interpret what's happening in the cycle. And obviously, like Joshua, you said before we hit the recording, this is very niche and it's not something that you come across every day. But these are the issues. Talk to any woman. Agree? Like, I'm pretty sure that, if you talk to more than one woman who has, you find out how common menstrual cycle issues are and what happens when you go to the, your traditional conventional practitioner when you have an issue with menstrual cycle, whatever it is, whether it's pain, whether it's bleeding, whether it's irregularity, it's pill, 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 no answers. And we're just left thinking we're nuts. And so there's a huge need for this type of support for women to be able to really figure out what's going on with their cycles.
First of all, I think it's incredible how much awareness you had at 17 years old. I feel like when I got to college, I was like, la-di-da, like whatever, I'm just going to go through school. So I think that's incredible that you really like forged your path at 17, 18 years old. When you talk about charting your menstrual cycle for somebody that might not be super familiar with what that looks like, I have an app that I use to track mine, but how would you go about encouraging a client or how would you go about educating a practitioner on what that looks like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think at the most basic level, people think, okay, I'm just going to track when my period is coming, which is totally a type of tracking at the basic level. And so when we get into fertility awareness, menstrual cycle charting, typically the main signs of fertility that we're looking at would include your cervical fluid, which we produce as we approach ovulation. So the first day of your cycle would technically be the first day of your period, the first day when you have true flow. So many women may have some spotting before their period actually starts, but we would be counting it from when you actually start to see that flow. And then once your period is over, so, a healthy, normal period lasts somewhere between 3 to 7 days, you would enter into kind of that pre-ovulatory phase. So from a fertility awareness standpoint, typically after your period is done, we might have some what we call dry days before you start to actually see cervical fluid. And cervical fluid can look like creamy white hand lotion in your underwear. It can look kind of like that raw egg white, clear, stretchy, and have a really lubricative or slippery sensation. And generally, you might just feel a little bit wet down there. I know when I was like looking back in retrospect, when I was a teenager and I had started menstruating, I remember that I noticed this, but I didn't know what it was. And I remember saying like, "Mom, feel wet down there." And she was like, "Wear panty liner."
Exactly.
That was the conversation.
That's it. Yeah.
And I mean, it goes in different directions because some women think they have an infection for a few days every month, and then they end up going to a doctor who might even give them antibiotics when there's like not an infection.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of stuff. The awareness piece is really important. But the point is, you know, once you get into after you've had your period, typically in a healthy normal cycle, we might see a few dry days that we call them. And then you start to see this cervical fluid. So the creamy white hand lotion or the clear stretchy. And then once you move into ovulation, once you actually ovulate, ovulation happens on one day of the cycle, we see a hormonal shift. So before ovulation, we're producing significant estrogen as that follicle is developing, as that egg is developing and preparing for ovulation. And that estrogen is what is actually, you know, stimulating the cervix to make that fluid. And after we ovulate, we produce significant progesterone, which shuts down that process. And so in a healthy, typical cycle, we would see most of that mucus, if not all of it, kind of stop. So we go back to having some dry days, and then we would have our period. So when it comes to your original question of tracking, we can look at the cervical fluid, whether it's like we pay attention when we go to the bathroom and we're wiping, or we look at our underwear, or if you're tracking in a certain method, some women may check internally. So it depends on the method that you're tracking. We can take our basal body temperature. So that just means that you take your temperature first thing in the morning when you get out of bed. And again, it's really cool if you're kind of like a science nerd like I was, because I mentioned the hormonal, you know, interplay. So before ovulation, primarily estrogen. After ovulation, the progesterone is dominant, and progesterone has a thermogenic effect on the body. So if we're taking our temperature first thing in the morning before we get out of bed, you'll notice that if you've ovulated, you're going to see the temperature rise and stay high. So that's pretty cool. So we have this mucus around ovulation. We have the temperature shift. If you're really into it, you can check your cervical position. You can wash your hands and insert a finger. And the cervix, the position of your cervix, which is where the baby comes out, right? That dilates during labor, but and it's at the end of your vagina. So if you insert a finger, that's what you hit. But if you are tracking that, you'll notice that it becomes softer and higher, harder to reach, I guess you could say, around the ovulation window. And then outside of ovulation, it may be more firm and it may be lower in position. So all of these things are really cool. So when I was, late teens, learning this stuff for the first time, like you read about it and it sounds really cool. And then you start, checking and tracking and you see that it's consistent. So every cycle, these changes are happening. And the only difference is before you just didn't know. Like your body was, if you're not on, a hormonal method, this is what your body's doing in the background. And now you're just paying attention to it.
Yeah. I get excited to take my temperature every morning. Like, I just think it's the coolest thing to see, like, oh, my temperature is, 0.02 higher than it was yesterday or whatever. But no, I think it's very interesting. It's very empowering to be able to track something like that. And I do think the more connection that you have to yourself, the easier it is to kind of flow through the weeks, right? Like, I typically know around ovulation, I am a little bit sleepier. It's just going to happen, right? But then when I get right past my cycle, I feel incredible, and I think it's nice to be able to see those things. Talking about the birth control piece, how does birth control affect our menstrual cycle?
So hormonal birth control, I'm assuming you're asking about.
Yes.
Yeah. And so it's really interesting because there's a lot of myths around birth control. I don't know if they're as prevalent as when I was younger. They used to tell us that it's like, oh, it makes your body think it gets pregnant or whatever. I think for combined hormonal contraception, so the most common kinds, so the pill and the patch, the ones that have that synthetic estrogen and synthetic progestin kind of balance. So the primary mode of action is to suppress ovulation. And so it kind of works in a couple of different ways, but obviously in order to conceive, you have to release an egg. So if you're not ovulating, conception can't happen. And so it's helpful if you're looking for birth control that it's suppressing ovulation. A secondary mode of action is that it prevents the uterine lining from fully developing. So the actual lining of your uterus is quite thin. And so theoretically too thin to actually result in implantation if something were to happen. And then another mode of action is that it prevents the production of that fertile quality, clear, stretchy cervical fluid that we were talking about. And so while, that was a common thing that I was told growing up, like, oh, it just makes your body think it's pregnant. So, if we look at the natural hormone production of a woman who's currently on birth control, it would be most similar to a woman in premenopause or menopause, because the influx of artificial hormones then suppresses your natural hormone production. The reason that we're making estrogen and progesterone throughout our cycle when we're not on contraceptives is because the ovaries are developing the egg. So as the follicle develops, that's where we're producing our estrogen. And after ovulation, that's where we're producing our progesterone. So if you're not ovulating and we're not moving towards any type of follicular development, then our natural production of estrogen and progesterone is like a moot point. And so if you've ever wondered, well, look at the side effect profile, why is it that we have 20 somethings with, dry vaginas and low libido and things like that? Well, it correlates with this really significant drop in our natural hormones. Because I think we think about the birth control pill and it's like, oh, it's estrogen and progesterone. It's the same, but it's not. It's a synthetic version. And so it doesn't act the same way. And it certainly doesn't have the same effect as our natural hormones have on our body. So in terms of the effect of it, it's helpful to know how it's working. And then I think I don't think it's as controversial these days, but looking at the side effect profile, we have this idea, I think, when we are looking at contraception, that the only reason that we have ovulation, the only reason that we have a menstrual cycle is to get pregnant. It's kind of like that's our idea. So if we shut it down, then it doesn't matter. And then when we want to have kids, we just turn it back on. But when we look at the side effect profile, hopefully it becomes clear that for a woman of reproductive age, the menstrual cycle isn't just like an add-on. Like we're not machines. So if I buy a car, I can if I don't have back in the day, it shows how old I am, because back in the day, you could just buy the car and it may or may not have air conditioning. Now all the cars have it. But my point is if you removed it, the car would still work. It doesn't matter because it's a machine and these things are separate, right? But we kind of think of our bodies that way. So it's integrated for a woman of reproductive age. And so that's why when we look at the side effect profile of the pill, we see things like depression, low libido, painful sex, nutrient deficiencies. It changes how we metabolize nutrient, right? It's like the list goes on. And then there's the interest, the research about, even sexual preference. There's research about how when women are on the pill, they're more likely to choose men that are more genetically similar to them compared to when they're off. So it's obviously doing something in there, right?
Wow.
So this comes back to this whole idea that the menstrual cycle is like a vital sign, right? That's the fifth vital sign. So it is integral to what we're doing. So it's a bit of a controversial topic depending on where you want to go and depending on who you're talking to, because I know some people get all bent out of shape when you talk about things like that, because it's
what do people get bent out of shape about? What do you hear? Because
if I just read the research and say that there's research that shows that women, because there is, it's super interesting. It's like the evolutionary biology, environmental biology situation where they're looking at what makes the species, the mating process and the pheromones and all that stuff. So they do these studies. They have these t-shirt studies where they'll have women on the pill and they'll show their preference for the scent of these men, and women on the pill are choosing men that are more genetically similar compared to women off the pill. So people get bent out of shape because you're like, well, you can't talk about stuff like that because you're going to make women not want to use the pill. And it's well, I don't know. I'm not so concerned about the pharmaceutical industry. I'm concerned about women having the correct information about the pill so they can make an informed choice. And, obviously every woman doesn't have the same experience, but there was a woman who I interviewed on my podcast many years ago, and her story is in my book because she had that experience of, she was on the pill, she met a guy, they were dating, and then she came off the pill for whatever reason. And all of a sudden, she couldn't stand the way he smelled, and they ended up breaking up.
Oh
Obviously, this is
my
not what always
gosh.
happens.
Right. I was about to say it's funny
Oh,
because I love my husband more off the pill than I do on the pill. I'm like, you're much cuter to me off the pill.
Yeah.
and
But
so
there's like a
people,
whole rabbit
I
hole
have,
there.
yeah, I have actually seen that before, how like your body can start to give you those signs. It's like, this is not for me. That's so crazy though.
so people will get
Whoever thought to
offended,
think
or
that?
people get in their feelings when you're just talking about informed consent and research, and
I
they,
mean, I feel like it's a little less so. Like when I
okay,
maybe like like I feel like because the pill has been around, the first pill was put on the market in 1960. So there's like a lot of research about the pill.
okay,
Um,
okay,
and so I think that there's so much research that people can't really deny it.
yeah.
But there was certainly this kind of idea that if we criticize it and if we highlight what's bad about it, then maybe someone's going to come and try to limit access. So there's also
Mm,
that kind of like, oh no, we
I
need to make sure
see.
that we have access to it. We can't be criticizing it because, but it's a $30 billion a year industry. We're not losing access.
I see what you're saying. So there's a little bit of let's just say it's all great and perfect and wonderful because eventually somebody might try to snag it. We've worked really hard for it. We don't want it taken away.
That
Mhm.
kind of thing.
Kind of,
Because
I
it's
got you.
credited for,
Yes,
yeah,
I got
it's
you.
given
Yeah.
credit for the sexual revolution. But
Yeah,
again,
I got you.
I'm a wrench in that conversation because I mean, I feel like true freedom is we need to have truly informed consent in order to have true freedom. And there's pros and cons. Did you know that the birth control pill, Enovid was the title of the first pill. Did you know that it was the first drug ever released on the market that was not for an illness? It was to stop a normal bodily function.
I didn't know
That
that.
was the
Mm-mm.
first pill
Before
to
the
do that.
pill, all medication was for an illness, but the pill was the first medication to give to a healthy person to stop a normal bodily function.
That's a moneymaker then.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, well, I mean, when you look at yes, but when you look at the history, it wasn't just like, oh, we're just like there
Yeah,
was a
yeah,
need. Like back then, when you had married women who had had 7, 8 children, who maybe wanted to stop having children, the doctors would be giving them hysterectomies, and that was kind of the option.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not to say that like everyone who made it was
Okay,
evil.
okay, okay.
It's
I hear
not to
you.
say
No,
that,
I hear you.
but
I
it
hear you.
is to
Yeah.
say that legitimately it was the first drug ever designed to give to healthy people to shut down a normal bodily function.
So you talked about something that kind of made me curious. Um, I got married a little bit later in life, and we had a baby a little bit later in life. So I had an entertaining single season. Um, what and I would hear women say this. Well, I'm on a certain type of birth control. I've not had a period in 5 years.
Yeah.
And they almost are like, oh, as soon as I could find a birth control that could even eliminate my cycle, I was all for it. And how you said, I love your idea. Like, you take away the air conditioning in my car, it's still going to function as a car. And I was like, wow, I think about what you said. Women have said like, oh, I'm just going to take away my period. It's inconvenient, but my body's still going to run. I'm still going to be great. If I ever want to have kids, oh, we'll just take that implant out and be on the way to go have kids. They think it's like a switch. And the way you described it was perfect. I understand your analogy. Can you explain, there's a cost for that, I assume, for a woman not having their cycle for 5 years and having an implant. Is there a cost? What is that cost? What are their concerns for a woman who has that type of birth control? Maybe they had it from 18 to 25 and now they want to start having children. What are some concerns there for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a couple things that come to mind. One thing I want to say before I really get into it is that I mentioned the first pill came out in 1960, and some of the women who were in that test group for the few years before it actually was released were actually women who were trying to get pregnant. And the doctors put them in the trial. And the thought was like, well, if we kind of pause their cycle, then maybe it'll jumpstart it. So that's kind of why. So back then, when the women took the pill, the first iteration of the pill did not have the bleed week. it was just continuous. And so they stopped menstruating, obviously, because it suppresses ovulation. And the women thought they were pregnant. And the doctors were like, no, no, it's the medication. But this is 1960. Like there was nothing like this. And so the only reasons women didn't have their periods were if they were breastfeeding or if they were pregnant or if they were legitimately ill. And so they honestly thought they were pregnant. And then, when the doctors were like convinced them, like, no, it's a medication, they were devastated because these are some of the women in the trials were trying to get pregnant. So that's when that's the reason that we have a pill bleed. So we've come a long way because now we have women saying, I don't want my period, right? And we have companies coming out with pill versions that allow you to not bleed. And then of course we have the implants and the IUDs that for some women result in them not having any bleeding. So the first thing I want to say is like we've come a long way because back then it was so unnatural to not have a period that they had to put in the fake bleed as more of a marketing thing to make it seem like it was the same as having your normal cycle. Because when they added the fake bleed, they kind of didn't have to have the conversation anymore around like what it was really doing. It made it easier to kind of like make the women feel like it was similar to their normal cycle.
Sorry, real quick, is the fake bleed like the sugar pill that would be in the birth? Okay, perfect. Cool.
Yeah. And to this day, many women hear this and it's like they thought that they were having their period because they're bleeding. But in order to have a true menstrual period, you have to ovulate first. And so therefore, when you're having this bleed, because you took the hormones for 3 weeks straight and then you pulled them for a week, that's what we would call like a withdrawal bleed. And it's not a true menstruation because you didn't ovulate.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead.
It's not really it's a fake menstrual cycle.
Well, and what's interesting is that now we've come full circle. So now you'll find the drug companies and marketing and, they're officially kind of saying like, well, there's no reason. There was never a reason for that. There was never a medical reason which is true. There was never a medical reason to have these women, using these 28-day pill cycles. They could have made it a 42-day cycle, but they didn't because they wanted to make it mimic a normal, natural menstrual cycle. And they wanted that bleed so that the women didn't freak out when they didn't have their periods. They needed for them to feel like it was still normal.
And I would say for now, it's like, even if you are on birth control, but you do get that bleed, it's like, okay, phew, I'm not pregnant.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. But now to your question around, well, what about these women who are then not bleeding for years on end? I mean, of course, we have all of the, negative feelings and thoughts around menstruation, that it's horrible, that it's, an inconvenience, and this idea that it's only relevant if we're trying to have babies. And so we have an interesting relationship to our bodies. And that opens the door for new marketing, right? It's like, oh, well, now we have this pill that you don't have to bleed at all for 4 years or for 4 months or for 6 months, or you can only bleed. There was seasonal, right? Like you just get to bleed a couple times a year. And now we have a market for that. Whereas, 30 years ago, we did not have a market for that. So to your question, though, about, what are the implications? So when we look at birth control, the way that I talk about it, like when we look at what the research has to say about the potential impact on fertility, I don't see in the research anything to suggest that there's like a permanent negative effect on fertility. But what we do see in the research is that long-term use, and typically long-term use is defined in research articles as 2 years or more, which is, when I say that, women are like, what?
Yeah.
Because we would think, because most women are using the pill, if they're using it and if they're using it consistently, they're using it for many more years than that. But in the research, typically 2 years or more is considered long-term. And what we see is a temporary period of subfertility post-pill. And we see that shown in a couple of different ways. So some research studies would look at the menstrual cycle parameters. So they're just looking at how long is the cycle, when is ovulation happening, how long is the luteal phase, the second half of the cycle, maybe what does her cervical fluid look like, those kinds of things. And, there's a study that I cite in the Fit Vital Sign, and they had a group of women that had never used birth control, and then they had a group of women who had used it for 2 years or more, but they came off. And they measured all these different parameters of their cycle, including the cycle length, including luteal phase length, which is the second half between ovulation and your period. They measured even their mucus scores and all of that. And it took on average about 9 to 12 cycles before the group of pill users kind of looked indistinguishable from the never users.
Okay.
So just in terms of like the cycle just normalizing the length and all that, we already have a period of time that's, interesting.
Okay. Okay.
There's other studies that look at time to pregnancy specifically. So there was, and I always have a bone to pick with these types of studies because most of the studies that we see, the more recent studies, they will always kind of they'll look at a 12-month time frame, and they will often exclude women who had any history of cycle issues or, any kind of health issues. If they had PCOS, like anything that was an issue, they often exclude some of those cases from these studies. And so the studies will say something like, well, 78% of women conceived within 12 months. And that's the whole story. But
Okay.
what's interesting is if you find studies that actually look month to month, there was a study that looked at the pill, looked at the hormonal IUD. It looked at, I think it looked at the shot. So it looked at a variety of different methods. It looked at condoms, so non-hormonal methods as well. And compared to the condom users, the birth control, like the pill users, on average took about twice as long to conceive. So it was like 4 months for just non-hormonal users to conception, but about 8 months on average for the pill users. The shot was the worst, 15 to 18 months was the average there. The shot is kind of known to have a longer time or just it takes longer for your body to normalize after that. So I think the perspective that I like to share about the pill, it's not this like horrible doom of, you'll never be able to conceive, but we do know that there is a short-term suppression of fertility. And the other piece of it that I think is important is that I noted that a lot of these studies will exclude women that have other cycle issues. But as I mentioned earlier, any woman who has any issue with her cycle, when she goes into her, regular practitioner, she's that like the pill is the thing. So whether it's an irregular cycle, whether it's period pain. So one of the challenges that we're not thinking about for women who are taking the pill for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, is that if there is an underlying issue, like if she did have irregular cycles, that was never addressed. Like, so I have
Right.
analogies for everything. So my analogy for the woman who was put on the pill because she had, let's say, an irregular cycle is like if I had a summer vacation house and my pipes burst over the winter, and so there's water flowing everywhere, and I just, shut off the water. That's so
Yeah.
then like I go back up and it's like, great,
So,
there's no
yeah.
water. Let me turn it
Yeah.
on again, right? So
Yeah.
so that's one of the issues that's kind of like, it's not, so if you have a woman who then has been on the pill for a long time and she comes off and it takes her like a year for her period to come back, that's not because the pill caused her to have infertility. It's because the pill was potentially masking the issue that was happening underlying. And then the last thing I'll say about that is age is a factor. When we look at the research, the most significant factor that affects fertility is age. And it's one of those subjects, again, that can be a bit controversial. But one of the things is that I've spoken to so many women who were maybe like in their mid-30s now, and they're just as terrified of an unplanned pregnancy in their mid-30s as they were when they were like 19. A lot has happened since then.
Mm.
We need to have that education around it. And so I would say, okay, when we get into our 30s, if we want to have kids at some point, we should start reconsidering our birth control method and potentially coming off hormonal methods within about a year to 2 years minimum of when we want to start having kids, just to give our body a chance to sort itself out. Because if there was any issues, that would give you enough time to sort it out. You don't have time when you're 38 to like have 2 years to sort out your issues.
Okay.
Right. So yeah.
I like too that like you will then fall back on educating like, okay, this is how you look at your menstrual cycle and this is how you allow it to help you, because I do think that that is a fear. Like even though we will get to a place where we are ready to have children, am I really ever going to be ready to have children?
No, you're not.
Right. Exactly. So I'm like, I want the backup plan of like being able to trust how to track my cycle. Right. Like I want to feel confident in that because I don't want my only confidence to be in just hormonal contraception.
Well, and things switch so fast. So the other thing too is there's an activity that I like to do in my programs, and some of your listeners might have heard of the concept of the intention scale. And so, I mean, we can play this game if you want to. It's
Yep.
up to you.
Do it.
But on a scale of 0 to 10, how much do you want a baby today? So 0 would be absolutely not, and I might terminate if I conceived. And 10 would be probably already am having unprotected sex and might be pregnant right now, just have to take the test on Friday,
Ooh,
right?
ooh,
So
Mhm.
where are you? Let's play the
Ooh.
games.
Yeah. Where am I?
Yeah.
I feel like I teeter between like a 4 and a 7. Ask me on certain days of my cycle, it's between a 4 and a 7. If I'm around all my friends' kids and I love their kids so much, I'm like, maybe a 7.
Okay.
7's pretty
I'm-
high. Oh, 7's a good score.
That's what I'm
It is.
saying. That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. I'm getting older.
Those ovaries are talking to you.
They're talking to me.
7.
Yeah.
I was expecting less.
That's why I said I'll back it up and say some days it's a 4.
Yeah, this is no. I'm going with a 7. I heard 7 in there,
Ah.
so I'm running with a 7.
Play it as a 7. Play it as a 7.
Yeah.
Where are you? I'm curious.
If my wife got pregnant, we would have to remove all the guns in the home. 100%. We would. I would be on watch. I would be my family would have to come take care of me, and we'd have all kinds of problems. I'm 49. I have anxiety about this. I think I might take the sweatshirt off. The
So
sweatshirt
does that
might
mean
come-
you're like, I still want a number. I'm actually that annoying.
2.
Okay. That's
Two.
fair.
2.
Okay.
I'm a 2 because the idea of terminating a pregnancy for me is it's not even in my vocabulary. So I would you put that in the 0. Could we financially do it and make it happen and be fine? Would it be harder on life? Yeah, but would I like my wife would tell you a 9.
Aw.
My wife would have 1,000 children and go crazy, right? So no, but would it be tough? Yes. Upon pregnancy and birth, would you be absolutely elated? Yeah, probably. Right? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yes.
yeah, right.
And in all fairness, I will play. I'm a 4 because we're done, but I would be open to having
How many
more,
do you have?
but we have 3.
3. Okay.
13, 10, and 3.
13, 10, and 3.
Wow.
What was
Yeah.
it like for the 10 between the 10 and 3? Did you guys were like, I don't want
We
this
had 2
one.
boys in a row, and so we were like, we need a minute.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I
have
am like, I've
And then
always
my
said
husband was like you. He was at a 2 for a really long time. And then during COVID, I randomly asked him because we run this, we do this a lot. And whenever I do it in class, I usually like, hey, what are you today?
Yeah.
And he was like 8. And I was like, okay.
yeah, right. That's awesome.
Yes.
I got to get it before it goes back to a 2.
Yeah,
Yes.
right. Take advantage of this right now.
I love it. That's
I think
hilarious.
that's a fun game.
Mhm.
Boy, that
But
really
the
makes you think about
reason-
things.
Yeah. And so the reason that I brought this up to kind of take it back to what we were talking about is that a woman can go from like a 0 or a 1 to like an 8 in like
That's
a day.
me.
Like it
That- yeah.
legitimately can happen.
Yeah.
Because you could be waiting for whatever. You could be waiting for the guy, the job, the raise, the whatever,
Mhm.
whatever it is. And your body though, back to the birth control conversation, like if you've been on this birth control for 15 years, your brain can immediately go to this 9 or whatever, but then your
Mhm.
body's going to need like several months to a year. And during that several months to a year can be the most traumatic time because we have been indoctrinated from elementary and junior high that we can get pregnant on every day. And there was in the 5th vital sign, I quoted a client who's like, my doctor told me that in your 20s, you're so fertile, you get pregnant by sitting on a warm bus seat. Like we are so, we are like so like indoctrinated. So what happens emotionally, it's like, I've seen this because I've worked with clients for like 2 decades. So you have all of these assumptions and whatever, you've been so scared to get pregnant for all of this time. And you come off the pill assuming that you're just going to get pregnant immediately. And you might be fine the first month, but by the second month, you're freaking out. By the third month, you probably already have doctor's appointments lined up. And we're doing IVF or IUI by month 4. Like this is the part that no one's
Wow.
talking about.
Yes.
So this is where like, if you can go from like we've seen it, like I have clients who they're waiting until they get married. So like legitimately like the day after the wedding, they're a 10.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You answered a question for me actually within your conversation. I was going to ask you how long should a person wait, and your rule of thumb is a year and a half to two. Like,
Well, so I'm my co-author, like so my most recent book, Real Food for Fertility, I co-authored with Lily Nichols, and we went back and forth on this because I tend toward a higher number.
okay,
I tend toward, a minimum of 12 months when possible. Obviously, I understand that that's not possible for everybody. Um, and I would say if you went on the pill for other reasons, if it was like my period pain was so bad I couldn't function, if it was like I never knew when my period was coming or whatever issue, or my PMS was so bad that, my doctor told me I had to take the pill, then I would say a minimum of 12 to 18 months when possible. And just as general, like I have insurance for my car. I do not plan to get into an accident. So my insurance policy for anyone who wants to have children would be like, if you have the ability, like if you have enough forward time to think 18 months to 2 years, because if you did come off the, like, first of all, you're an adult. It was so funny. I had this conversation actually with I met this really lovely woman on a plane, and she like was like, what do you do for a living? And then this ended up being like a 4 hour
right,
conversation.
yep,
But it was interesting because she was in her 30s and she was like so terrified, similar to some of the comments that I think you've made, Gray, just casually, like,
Mhm.
are you ever ready? And that kind of thing. And I was kind of like, well, you're a grown up. Like you've probably done a lot of really complicated things in your life. You know what
I
I
Yeah.
love
mean? Like
that. Yeah,
as women, like we're just not given permission. I don't think I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a cultural thing or whatever, but yes, when we're 18, 19, maybe we're not as mature and whatever, but when we're literally in our 30s, we're still questioning our ability to sort
Yeah.
this out when
mm,
you've
Yeah.
done so many complicated things in
yeah,
your life up until this
Well,
point.
I'll argue it's because it's the people older than you are always like, well, wait until this.
But
Well,
they had
wait.
kids when they were
yeah,
like 21.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. But
yes,
and I think that's why they are constantly like, wait until this because they were so young that when they did it, that they like
But
I
they figured it
feel
out.
they did, but I feel like I'm at a place now where I'm almost 30 and I've figured out life. Not entirely, but like I feel more prepared than if you would have told me I was going to get pregnant 8 years ago, I'd be like, no,
But the thing
can't.
about it is there's not like, so as a mom of three,
Hmm.
it doesn't mean it's not scientific evidence. It just is what it is.
hmm,
Like there's nothing you could do to prepare. Like you could
Yeah,
read all the books, you could do whatever, and then your child comes out. You
totally.
don't know who you're getting. They come
no,
out with a personality from birth.
Yeah.
You can read whatever you want. You can do
yes,
whatever you
Hmm.
want, and then they come out, and like you have no. It's just like your
And you have
body
two
goes, oh,
boys.
and they're
Yeah.
yeah,
different. And then the girl,
Yeah.
now I have a girl, and it's I have my kind of hard boy mom, get off the counter, stop jumping off
yeah, yeah,
everything, and
yeah,
then now
yeah,
I have this
Yeah.
girl, right? Like
Hmm.
there's nothing to prepare you. So that's a whole other conversation. I feel like that's a different kind of conversation around like what our culture tells us doesn't match our biology. It is very
Hmm.
inconvenient, but whether we like it or not, we are most fertile in our 20s.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, regardless of what your opinions are, your thoughts are, whatever we want to talk about, if we want to get mad at me for saying it, because I'm going to encourage all these young girls to get pregnant. That's when the biology says to get pregnant.
yeah.
Yeah. We
I
just,
love, I
I
love
think
your
we
approach.
push it. Yeah.
I love your approach on like, hey, I'm just telling you what the research is, and I'm just telling you what the literature says. I'm not trying to hurt your feelings.
No,
I'm trying to well, don't you think we like
don't
the
shoot
more
the messenger.
the more
Well,
informed we are, right? Like you keep saying about the more informed we are, the better we can make choices and decisions. Like I didn't know, I'll be honest with you, and even when we started this series, I'm like, guys, I'm going to claim ignorance on 99.9% of these things. Um, the idea of managing birth control around your cycle, and then you can only, so I did homework before this, and I found in some of your stuff talking about um you can only get pregnant during certain times of your cycle, and more I'm seeing more and more talk about people talking about, hey, a form of birth control is tracking and charting your cycle, knowing that
mhm,
you can't get pregnant today. Like you will now in a week, yes, but now you
mhm,
can't. I didn't know this.
mhm.
I didn't know that. I was one of those kids at 20 years old where like that was my greatest fear.
Oh yeah.
in life. In life.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. Um, when me and my wife decided, I was like, all right, she wants to have a kid. I knew she wanted to have a child. I'm on board with it. There is no time that's going to be right. I'm like you. Like, there's not, like, well, you're going to wait 3 months and something's going to be different. Life's challenging. It's dynamic. That's not, it ain't
Everything will
going to
be
happen.
different in
Yeah.
September.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
No.
And we did think, like, all right, as soon as we'll start, we'll just get pregnant next month. And I'm like, where did that come from? Like, now that you say it, I'm like, that's the most ridiculous thing for me to ever think as a guy in itself. Is like,
The research shows for two
yeah,
healthy people, there's an average of a 25% chance per cycle if everything's great. So on
It's
average, it's 4 months.
you
and you're
really
saying
don't.
if that means everything's great.
Yeah.
If everything's great. And
What
then if
percentage
there's
of
like
people are everything's great though? Is there any research on that? Like, how many people are like
1 in 6 couples struggle
bingo?
with
That's what I was.
infertility,
One in
15%.
six, 15%. So we're assuming everything's. And for dude, I think it's a little bit of an ego thing, right? Like for dudes, they're like, I'll get 15 women pregnant this month.
Yeah, and for dudes, we can talk about that. You said that you already did on one
Yeah,
of your
no, I'm on.
podcasts,
Well,
but
it was actually I
there's
was looking through. It was my next part, so we can go right into it.
yeah, there's like the 70% decline. Like the men in the
Mhm.
1940s had an average sperm concentration of about 114 million per milliliter, and the average dude today, it's probably closer to 50 million per milliliter. So
It's
That's depressing.
there's a whole
yeah.
and couples who are trying to conceive for a year or more, statistically, it's not likely that his sperm is optimal.
Yeah.
But no
I
one is
was
asking about his sperm.
Well, we've talked about that too before. Culturally, and I think you probably go back to maybe even the 80s, maybe the 90s. I don't know. These decades are blurring. Um, if a couple can get pregnant, it's usually the dude turning around staring at his wife going, well, what's wrong with you?
Well, and 50% of the time he's a contributing factor, 30% of the time it's solely him.
Yeah, which is what we're learning about more now, which is why I thought it was very important to include somebody to talk about men's fertility. And you're seeing it posted a lot more on social media now. So, like, one of the beauties of social media is that we're looking them in the face and saying, you need to stop drinking so much beer, right? Like, that is a huge piece of it. But I think a question that I want to ask is for somebody that maybe is on birth control, kind of bringing it back to like the fertility piece in total. If somebody is like, I'm not ready to give up birth control yet, or maybe I need to be on it for my cycle irregularity and I really haven't had that conversation, maybe somebody with PCOS, what could they be doing to support their fertility until they are ready to come off of that? Like, is there something that they could do to boost? I know food is a big thing that you talk about. Um, what are things that they could do to help their fertility?
Well, so I do want to make a comment that, if someone has been told they have PCOS and they're on the pill and that's like supposedly helping, it's the water pipes scenario.
Mhm.
The pill does not actually solve these problems. And when a person is prescribed birth control for irregular cycles, that's kind of like an off-label use for symptom management. It's not like they call it a treatment, and especially for PCOS, because the pill significantly reduces free testosterone.
Mhm.
And one of the common traits of women in PCOS can be elevated androgens, which is why you'll see like the cystic acne or the hirsutism. And so, quite literally, they'll say it's a treatment. But just know that it's not actually fixing the problem. It's just reducing the symptoms so that you get your fake bleed every month and you feel like everything's great. Um,
Mhm.
and some women get upset when I say that because, of course, there's some women, of course, who experience really painful periods and the pill might be giving them some relief. And so then, we could say it's treating, but it's certainly reducing symptoms. But um, to your question, remind me what your question was, because I feel like I went on a little tangent there.
No, that's okay. So somebody that is on birth control and is not ready to be off of it, or maybe medically is like, I would like to stay on it for my painful periods. What can they do to help their fertility when they do come off of it?
Right. Okay. So yeah, so that was why I wanted to make that comment first. But I would
Mhm.
say that you want to take some time to understand what's happening in your cycle. I feel like that's a good opportunity to start educating yourself. I mean, um, you know, I wrote a book. There's lots of books on menstrual cycle so it's not just like a shameless plug, but it is a good opportunity to start learning a little bit more about how your cycle works. If the one thing that I recommend for women who are wanting to come off birth control pill or whatever type of hormonal birth control to conceive is I recommend coming off before you're ready to get pregnant. So coming off when you know you still need to use some sort of birth control, so some sort of non-hormonal birth control. So it would be a good opportunity to start researching what you and your partner might be comfortable with. We do live in an interesting generation. I grew up in the generation of if you have sex, you'll get AIDS and die. And so they really push condoms and they just push them for everybody because STIs were concerned. Apparently now they're not because they just push hormones on everybody. And so I find that to be really interesting because now you have a whole generation of young women who have never had to negotiate anything with a partner. And the assumption is that he's just not going to use any protection. So that is part of the conversation as well, where when I have these conversations with younger women, it's like you've navigated more things that are complicated than this. If you're in a relationship with somebody in a sexual relationship, like unless he's like a total jerk, this should be fine. You should be able to have a conversation and navigate how you're going to manage this. So a big piece of it is like, you can do this. It's not like you're going to come off the pill and just immediately get pregnant because you're just so irresponsible. No, you're not. And you can do this. And there are non-hormonal methods. Condoms do work. And I know not everybody loves them, but 98% perfect use. We need to like get the information out there again so that women are not, because it's like women think if I'm not on the contraceptives, I will immediately get pregnant. This is the thought.
I used to think that. Yeah. Totally.
And like as if there's no such thing as condoms, as if there's no such thing as any other, like it's only the pill. So I don't know what happened. I think that was really heavy marketing with the $30 billion drug industry, because again, I'm just a little generation ahead and we were given completely different information. Yeah. So a big piece of it is like, you can do this. You are a grown up. You've navigated much more complicated things than this. Just do some research. Like if you were getting a haircut, you would be doing research. Like that's the same thing, just different topic. And then in terms of what to do to prepare your body, I do think it's important to learn a little bit more about nutrition. Like if someone did have really painful periods, it would be useful to learn about inflammation, what types of foods contribute to inflammation so that you can start to kind of reduce it. Obviously, we're talking about processed foods. We're talking about foods that are high in sugar. Just learn a little bit more about inflammation, inflammatory oils. The title of my most recent book is Real Food for Fertility. That gives a sense of moving away from some of the processed foods towards actual real food nutrition, and then also learn about, different key supplements, different key nutrients that reduce inflammation, whether we're talking about zinc or magnesium or curcumin and if it's really severe, then that may be a different conversation because, a significant percentage of women with very, very severe pain may also need to be screened for endometriosis. So if a person has a more significant concern, and that's why they were put on contraceptives, and that's the reason why that they are quite nervous about coming off, you can actually work with a practitioner. You could work with a functional medicine practitioner. You could work with a naturopathic doctor. You could work with a nutritionist for 2 to 3 months ahead of coming off the pill to work on reducing your inflammation, addressing your dietary things, get on a good supplement protocol so that you've at least given your body some, what it needs. If you think it could be, PCOS, or if that's been suspected, same idea. You want to learn about, well, what are the nutritional aspects of this? And again, this goes back to what I was talking about before. When you're on birth control and it's giving you this 28-day bleed, every 28 days you're getting a bleed, then you are able to kind of live your life however and not address the issue. But when you come off, like, and this is one of those kind of challenging conundrum or questions or whatever, like if you weren't on it and your periods were 90 days apart, that would be concerning to you and you probably would figure this out. But because you can go on the pill and bleed every 28 days, then you just don't have to deal with it, right? So that's something to think about as well. If you are in the category of like, I have no idea what my periods would be like. They were really weird when I was a teenager. I haven't had one for 20 years. It might just like there's so much fear around coming off the pill to the point that
Mhm.
I don't really understand because I didn't really have that level of fear around it. And I think it literally is potentially because of the generational
Just
divide.
I was gonna say to speak on it, I think it was always put into our heads from parents or from sex ed or from just like societal pressure that getting pregnant is a bad thing at our age, like at a young age. So, you want to make sure you're doing everything you can to not get pregnant. And it was so normal to get on birth control at 17 or 18 years old. Look, everybody's on birth control. All of my friends have been on birth
But
control.
that I understand, but I don't know
Mhm.
how we're still with 35 and we're still there. I guess that's the part
Because
where it's like it never like it doesn't carry over. Like it just this
I,
fear continues. I've spoken to like 37-year-olds who are like so
yeah,
terrified of like getting pregnant before their wedding day. And I'm like, what are we
that was
like
me.
what is happening? Like
Yeah.
I'm
honestly,
not kidding though.
it's
Like
not the same as well, and
no,
I'm not trying to be judgmental. I
no,
feel
you're
like
not at all.
the reason I approach it this way is because I feel like inside I'm like that old grandma that's like enough.
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
you're old enough,
yeah.
you are smart enough, you have enough life experience. Whatever nonsense you have going on in your head, you are no longer 17. Like you have
Yeah.
this. So stop.
I think that's the whole thing though. It's like babies are scary and babies take a lot of work and I'm not ready to give up my independence. But I felt the same way. Like I
Yes.
came off of the
I agree with
IUD.
that part.
I
Yeah,
agree with all of it, but
Yeah.
it's not easier at 38.
No.
totally.
It's
But that's
actually
what I'm
easier
learning
to give up your
now.
independence at 21 because you just go with it.
Yeah. That's
Well,
what
I
I'm
think
learning now though. It's like I came off the IUD and I was off for like a year and a half. We got engaged and I was like, shit, I don't want to get pregnant before we get married. And I look back on that now and it was nice to have like that extra, protection in the back of my mind. It's one less thing to stress about because I'm planning a wedding. But we were together for a year and a half in between and like never got pregnant. And I'm like, I know that me coming, because I came off of it a month ago now, I'm like, I'm going to be fine. I feel confident in my ability to track my cycle, but that is where I loved your content, where I think you come in as a very important piece of the equation is we've got to teach young women to track their cycles. Because if you get to know this, like I always thought it was so easy to get pregnant, and then you find out it's so hard to get pregnant. This whole conversation, this whole series stemmed from my friends having really troubled times getting pregnant and it taking 12 months, 18 months, 2 years. I have a friend it took 4 years to get pregnant. Like it's very challenging. And so I think that this conversation needs a more open door and a larger door so that people can get to know like it is challenging. It does take time and your life is not over if it happens.
well, you make a
Well,
really
and
good you
can I
make
just
a
say like it can be challenging. It shouldn't
Yeah,
be. So in
correct.
my
Right.
perfect world, what I would love to see different would be the education. Like I keep going back to that, but so for young women, it would be really, really helpful if we were educated about our cycle, like you said. So if we were able to track our cycle, understand what a normal menstrual cycle looks like, understand that extreme pain, ridiculous, out of control PMS where you can't go to work, these things are not normal, even
Hmm.
though they may be common, and understanding a little bit about how our cycle is a reflection of our health so we can actually because one of the great things is like if you learn how to track your cycle and you choose, obviously everyone is not going to make this decision, but if you choose to avoid pregnancy without hormones and just track your cycle and kind of sort this out with non-hormonal methods, the great thing about that is you can actually know by tracking what's happening, like if your body's healthy, if it's in alignment, all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And then when you're ready to get pregnant, like I said, going from the 2 to the 8, like your body's already there. And so
Yeah.
my perfect world of definition of feminism would include being able to get pregnant easily when you're ready. And then part of that conversation also is educating the men and the women about nutrition so that we
mm,
can prepare in advance because a lot of that the issue when couples are trying for 2 years, 3 years, or whatever, a lot of that is the guy too, and a lot of it is nutrition because we're not educated about fertility or any of these things.
Hmm.
I can't
Yeah.
maybe and again some people will say, hey, shut up as the dude, you shouldn't have a say in this, right? You hear people say that. As the dude, you don't have a say, you're as the dude. I'm like, I can't think of anything more empowering on the side of feminism than managing your body's ability and being able to have children. I can't think of anything more feminist than that. I
Hmm.
can't. I have a different view of it, I guess. I can't have a say. I can't have an opinion on that. And you said something very important, and it's so refreshing to hear you say this. you're rejecting the idea that there's a loss of freedom. Like, because you heard people say like, oh, it's the cultural side around having a kid and the loss of your freedom. Yes, it is a responsibility. I just don't attribute that responsibility of being pregnant or having children connected to the loss of my independence and my freedom as a woman. Does that make sense? Do you kind of understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I look at it a little bit differently. I think that there's a significant shift that happens when you have a child.
Hmm.
So like I don't know if I would be fully having this business if I didn't
Hmm.
have my children when I did, you know. I do think that I guess I push back on the idea that having children is a bad thing. I get
Yes,
why our
and that's
culture is
what that's why
so
I'm kind of
scared
agreeing with
about
you
it or
on that.
whatever,
Yeah,
but and I'm definitely not saying that everyone should go and have kids when they're 16.
yeah,
Like I'm
yeah,
not,
yeah, yeah,
obviously
yeah,
not saying
yeah,
that.
yeah,
What I'm saying though is that we should understand that if those fears around getting pregnant young, like that should have an end date.
yeah.
It shouldn't just be that
Yeah.
we are now in our like 30s and still acting like we're 19 and still just as scared as we were.
Hmm.
Because at some point, those same parents who are telling you not to have kids young want grandkids. Like it's just so like this has gone too far, right? Like it's just, I get it, but like what, even from 20, and maybe it's because I grew up in a small town and a lot of my friends were getting married. I don't know. But what I can say is like, now I live in a bigger city and like there's youth programs for 30-year-olds. I'm so confused. So there's something about like we have to figure this out. Like, sure, there's a young adult season when you want to figure things out, but no, you're not a child forever. And I just feel like as women, because this is something I've heard a lot. Obviously, you can tell, right? You can tell I've
Hmm.
had many conversations like this.
Hmm.
And I find it so fascinating that we have, 28-year-old women, 30-year-old women, 32-year-old women that are so convinced that they're so immature and incapable. And I just don't understand that
Mm.
because you are an adult. You can,
There's,
and it doesn't mean run out and have a kid, but certainly like just stop thinking that it would be the worst thing ever.
I think there's probably deeper ties into that conversation. There's probably something that happened, whether to them or they've heard that they were like, I just can't picture myself in that. Because I do come from a place of never wanting kids. I did not want kids. If you asked me 5 years ago if I wanted kids, I would say no, I don't want kids. It took me marrying my husband to be like, I want you to be a dad, so I will have kids. And if you
Mm.
want 50, I will give you 50 kids. You
There's
better
another
Well,
hear
and
this and be like, I will buy you anything you want.
there's something else
well,
you
and
said too. Good.
I wanted to say something just about what you said about like I'm a man, I don't get to have an opinion. And
Hmm.
so, given that this has been my career for so many years, if anything, doing this work and working with women around charting has given me a newfound appreciation for men. Because, what I found is that for the most part, men are very, very supportive. They want their partners to be happy. And they're the good ones, anyways, which are most of them, are quite happy when their, partners start charting. Maybe because they're off the pill and they want more sex because they get their libido back.
Yeah.
But maybe just because they're happier, right? And so I do think that men are always part of this conversation, whether they acknowledge it or not, because regardless of whether you are partnered, you have a mother, sister, cousin, friend, you're surrounded by women somewhere, and it affects you guys.
Yeah. My wife is on
Absolutely.
progesterone. She's 42. Oh shoot,
I'm
43.
gonna tell her you said that.
Yeah. Uh,
I'm gonna tell her you forgot.
how old is she? 43, and she charts because she's on progesterone. And I remember looking at like her little chart thing she has up on the refrigerator and looking at it and go, "Oh my gosh, that's complex." I go, "Oh man, like I don't have to deal with any of that." I was like, "That's pretty impressive." So she charts it all, and then has progesterone and does that whole thing. The other thing you said to me that blows my mind, and I never thought about it when I was a teenager, there were condoms everywhere. Everywhere. Like you couldn't avoid the conversation everywhere.
They were on TV
And in
too. They
college,
were
it
in
was
the
on
teen shows.
TV, it was on the teen shows. They talk about it in the teen shows. You go to any kind of like health clinic, in college. They're everywhere. And you're like, man, did we just flat out forget about STIs?
I think we did because that
And I
just
go,
wasn't a
holy
thing
cow,
for me.
those two things are like, where did that go? And you're kind of
Mhm.
like, hey guys, if you're coming off the pill and you want birth control, use a condom. And you said that, part of me went, oh yeah, I remember those things.
Yeah.
And it's just like, where did that, and you, like you said, probably pretty genius marketing somewhere, right?
Well, and don't get me started on the next level entitlement of like to call out all the men of this younger generation to feel like they just are entitled to have like
Unprotected
I've had
sex. Is
I've
that what
had
you're talking about? They're
conversations with
entitled to
young men
what?
entitled to having unprotected sex with
Yeah.
women and feeling like if the woman got pregnant, it's her fault. So there was this it's like a Twitter thread many, many years ago that went viral. And I think this woman, it went so viral that I think this woman ended up writing a book. It was the design mom, her Twitter thread on abortion or something. And it was this whole thing because she was, and I don't 100% agree with everything, but her perspective was that all unplanned pregnancies are the fault of irresponsible ejaculations or something. She worded it better. But her thing was my thing, which is wrap it up or pull it out. Like, what level of entitlement do you have to be sleeping with women that you are not married to or whatever? Like, that
Mhm.
you, like, legit, like, all the, right? Like, all the women that you're just casually sleeping with. What right do you have to legitimately just be doing your
Freewheeling
irresponsible?
it. Yep.
Yeah. So I
Freewheeling
just,
it. Yep.
I, again,
Yep.
like people get really interesting about this because, I position it, inflammatorily on purpose to kind of say like, well, whose responsibility is it? I would say 100% responsibility with the man and 100% responsibility with the woman
Yeah.
because right. But this is the whole thing. That's a part of a conversation, which is like, we've gotten to a point that I am not comfortable with. So I've noticed certain things in like I'm old enough now to see a generational difference. Okay. So, and
Okay.
it's really weird. I'm the same age as your wife.
Okay.
So the younger women who were in my programs, they were unfamiliar with having to advocate for themselves, whether that's unfamiliar with having to actually ask their partner to use condoms, even if their partner is perfectly lovely. They just are not comfortable having that conversation because they've never had to, or the other part of the conversation, which is that maybe sex is painful or they're not experiencing pleasure, they're maybe faking it or whatever, but there's either way, they're not comfortable having that conversation. And as somebody who has never used birth control for like hormonal birth control for contraception ever in my life, there was never a time in any relationship with anyone that any man could ever just have access to my body and just like ejaculate whenever he wanted to
Yeah.
inside of
Yeah.
my body. Right.
Yeah.
Like it was never. And so I'm coming, like, I like to share that different perspective. You don't have to live like I do. This is not the point. The point is that you should hear a different perspective of like, what would it be like if you legitimately weren't on the pill and he couldn't just have this level of entitlement and expectation? Like, what if you had to have a conversation? What if you had to be like adults and negotiate the terms of your sexual engagements?
All of that is new to me. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Where did we go wrong? Like where was that gap that we no longer had are women not having that conversations with, well,
But
first off,
they're
are men
expected to
not
be
having
on the
those
pill.
conversations? Are men not
That's
having
what
the
I was gonna
conversations?
say.
Are
The
men not
pill
having the
makes the
conversations with
body
boys?
resistant to sperm. This is my theory. So you're getting into all the crazy places in my mind.
Fine.
So the pill makes the body resistant to sperm. So because that's what it does. We talked about it. It suppresses ovulation. It makes it so that you don't produce the fertile quality mucus, so the sperm technically can't enter into the birth canal, and it also thins the uterine lining. So the pill makes your body resistant to sperm. So now you're just available, and he can just do whatever he wants. No responsibility. Like, and I'm exaggerating here.
Yeah, I
Please
know what you're saying.
don't
No,
shoot
I
me
hear
down.
you. I hear you.
But I'm just saying, like when I teach fertility awareness for a living. I've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
When a woman is not on the birth control pill, her body's not resistant to sperm. Therefore, sex and the other thing too, the pill is not 100% effective. The typical use rates would make people squirm a little because it's not
Mhm.
100. The typical use rates are closer to 93%. So women on the pill occasionally do get pregnant too. So I would argue that we all should always be having the conversation if you're engaging sexually with anybody. What would happen if I got pregnant? Even if you use an IUD, like it's very rare, but it happens, right? Even women who use the IUD, there's a pregnancy rate. It's not zero. So first of all, everyone should be having this conversation. But I find it so interesting that within the fertility awareness teaching space in my programs, we always have to have, as part of the modules, we have to have these conversations around, how are we going to negotiate the fertile window? Like what type of birth control are we going to have? And I believe that it fosters stronger relationships, and it just this and I would argue that it should be happening regardless. Because like I said, the indignation from like the 20-something men who have this sense of entitlement, and like if she gets pregnant, it's her fault when you're legitimately ejaculating inside of her body. What level of entitlement is that? Anyway.
Do you really have have you had conversations with 20-year-old something men that they're like,
I have, and
oof,
I'm shocked.
oof,
I'm shocked
oof.
because of the things that they say. Because of the things that they
What
say.
do they say?
And I'm not,
That's on
you
her.
can't say,
That's
you can't
on
say
her.
all 20-something men are like
Yeah,
this,
yeah.
but I'm just saying that there's generally like, well, great. I think you're a bit younger than me. Like, am I wrong here by saying that there's like, it's generally accepted that the girl is supposed to be on hormonal birth control and like that's supposed to
100%.
be taken care of?
100%.
Like this is, and that is different to what when I was younger, if I was, like dating or whatever, the conversation always had to be had. Maybe it was because I wasn't on contraceptives, but the men didn't assume everyone was on birth control.
I think that's where the switch is. I think I was like on the tail end of condoms, I feel like, because condoms were still very widely talked about.
It makes me so
Like,
sad that you just said that because
I know, right? I know, right? I know, right?
that's what it is. It was very talked about in sex, but like it was like a high school thing, and then you went on to college, and everybody was on birth control.
yeah.
So I think that's probably where it was. It's like you're it's just an assumption you're on birth control. Like I said, I've maybe have like on one hand of girlfriends that have never been on birth control, maybe.
Yeah. And the thing about it is like my argument, and this comes from for years, I would lead group programs. So I'd have, all these different women, we'd have all these conversations. And with fertility awareness charting as an instructor, you have to have the conversation because you've pulled the goalie, so to speak. Your body is not resistant to sperm. Pregnancy is a possibility, which I would argue it's always a possibility. But
Totally.
we pretend that it's not. So within this, right, in this situation, we're acknowledging it is. But I've just found that the 20-somethings, they have not had these conversations. Like they're in long-term relationships and they're kind of like scratching their head, like how do we talk about this?
I know.
'Cause
I never did.
they've never had that conversation around because it's just assumed that so I think that that's worth saying out loud. And it's also worth kind of thinking, okay, well, what are the implications of this? Because I also see the 20-something women who aren't necessarily loving sex, aren't necessarily having orgasms every time. And that's not being discussed either.
It's lazy.
So I do think it comes at a cost.
I discuss it.
You should. You should.
I discuss it because I don't like doing anything I don't like.
Well,
That's my theory.
I don't know. Like I hope that things aren't as bad as I think they are.
100% discuss. No, I discuss it. Yeah.
I think there's so many correlations to that. So many. Like maybe it's we're not getting to know each other on as deep of a level. Maybe it's like I can't imagine having that conversation with my ex-boyfriend. Like if you're
people
together
have
for
sex
3 years,
before they hold hands in public.
100%, but that's like the norm now. Like
Oh,
that's
do
just
you
like
have those conversations too? Like
I
it
have a
sounds
very
like we're
interesting
having.
job.
Yes. Holy cow. We haven't even touched the I educate other providers concept. We
Yeah.
haven't even
Well,
touched
all of these things are part of that too, because this experience goes into how we educate our practitioners.
I know girls, and I know even moms, who have conversations in my time frame where I've heard moms say, "We're just going to throw her on the pill, and as long as she doesn't get pregnant, who cares?"
But that's it. That's the
And meanwhile,
conversation.
she could be having sex with all these dudes that are just totally selfish and just using her body for a masturbation tool. And she's just going along with the
And
ride because
never
in the
talked
movies,
about
they're
it.
having fun. And even worse, she could be faking it. And so he thinks he's amazing and he's horrible because he's selfish. I could
And
talk
now
about stuff all day.
nobody never talked about STIs, right? Never talked about
Well, and did they just go away? Because this
No.
is also the crazy part. Because you have this culture of like hook up, no condoms, just herpes. I don't know. Like, what is going on?
There's this movie. There's this
Is
movie
nobody
out.
afraid of herpes anymore?
there's
Like,
this movie that's
I
out,
think
and I
I'm
can't
just
remember.
old.
We watched this movie. This movie was on, and it was talking about this couple and sex was involved, and the guy goes, "Well, aren't you worried about herpes?" And the girl said that, and the guy goes, "Everybody has herpes," and she goes, "No, they don't.
Everyone
No,
you
they
slept
don't."
with,
Yeah,
literally.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it was kind of a joke,
Because you
but
gave it to them.
it was a joke. But to me, like the guy's like, everybody has it. Who cares? And I'm just
Yeah,
like, oh my
everybody,
gosh,
because
yeah, oh my
yeah,
gosh, like that's scary, right?
we opened up a can of worms.
Yeah,
But this is
no,
the thing about like this is the fertility awareness charting piece of it. It opens up the can of worms because all of a sudden you can't just rely on the pill. You have to
Mhm.
have the conversation. And then when you have the conversation, like so to your point about practitioners, we have to have those conversations. If your client is saying sex is painful, we have to figure out, is it painful because your partner sucks? Or is
hmm
it painful because you might have endometriosis and it's painful at certain times of the cycle? So like is this an issue of him not understanding how the female anatomy works and not doing enough foreplay to, ensure that she's
hmm
calm and relaxed? Or is it that she has an actual physical, issue that is related to the pain? So there's a lot of investigation. Like it just, you cannot do this work without then also like you're privy to the frequency of sex. You have to have these conversations. All of these types of things come up.
Has that been an issue too? As say, because I'm sure you've had tons, like you said, you're on a 4 hour plane ride, and this conversation was 4 hour, right? Like I'm sure you've had tons of conversations. Do you have the conversation with couples sometimes of like, hey, this isn't like if you guys want to get pregnant, it's not like twice a month.
Well, it could be because again, we just have to like we have to identify the window
Yeah, I got you.
and
Yep.
you have to have it sex at least one or more times in the window. So it actually doesn't have to be,
Oh no,
it's
yeah,
not
you're right.
about,
You're right, because
yeah,
you
it's not
based on
about like,
tracking. Yeah.
oh, you have to have all the sex. That's actually what their providers tell them. Like, have sex all the time, have more sex, have sex three
Oh,
times
they're
a
just
day.
rolling the
Like,
dice out there with the
yeah,
providers. They're
yeah.
just rolling
But
the
for
dice.
us, it's like, let's identify the window one or more times. I always say like one time for sure, and then everything else is bonus. And it's actually less pressure.
Um, I want you you always say shameless, people say shameless plug. I don't consider it a shameless plug. I think if you have value, please tell people your books and where they can find them. And when we post all this stuff, we will have them, all the links up. Tell people, is it 3 books?
Well, so it is actually,
Yes.
and thank you for that. So my
Yes.
first book, The Fifth Vital Sign, that really gets into this idea that the menstrual cycle is a vital sign, and it talks about fertility awareness for birth control and
Mhm.
conception. So it really gets into that, and also some of the conditions that are associated with menstrual cycle issues like
Yeah.
PCOS and hypothalamic amenorrhea,
Mhm.
etc. And my most recent book, Real Food for Fertility, as I mentioned, I co-authored that book with Lily Nichols, who's a registered dietitian nutritionist, and she wrote Real Food for Pregnancy. So we really brought our expertise together and wrote the book for women who are planning to conceive in the future. But I would
Mhm.
also say women who are having cycle issues and they just want their cycles to be optimal, they will also get a lot of value from that book. So it really marries the nutritional aspects of it. We didn't get so deep into it today,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
there's a lot of research on what we need to do to
Mhm.
have a healthy menstrual cycle. You can't have a balanced menstrual cycle with insufficient protein, fat, with insufficient food in general. And in order to then optimize egg quality and sperm quality for fertility and reduce time to conception, we really need to focus on the key nutrients that we know are associated with improved, sperm and egg health and all of those things. And then we also, of course, get into a lot of what we talked about today: timing, understanding fertility awareness for conception, and also overcoming things like PCOS, normalizing the cycle without birth control, bringing the cycle back for a woman who might have lost her cycle due to overexercise or undernutrition. And then some of the
Mm.
conditions that we talked about, whether it's endometriosis or fibroids, like we have a variety of sections on that. So it's a really meaty book, Real Food for Fertility. And then my third book, well, my second book is the workbook. So I created like a paper charting book in
Oh wow,
conjunction with my
okay.
first book, because even though most people use the apps, there's still a solid like 10 to 15% of my clients who like to chart on paper.
Yeah.
So that's my fertility awareness mastery charting workbook. So if you head over to fertilityfriday.com, you'll find most of it, and the Real Food for Fertility, realfoodforfertility.com.
And your
So pretty easy
podcast,
to.
you have the podcast, right?
The podcast, Fertility Friday, the first fertility awareness podcast ever in the 11th year of podcasting, which is crazy.
Wow,
So
you're ahead of the game.
yeah, OG, fertility
You're a
awareness.
fertility awareness OG. I'm down with that. And that's 11 years.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's pretty fun. We just hit 600 episodes.
Holy cow,
That's
that's
awesome.
awesome.
Yeah.
Good for y'all. I bet those. I'm going to go back, and I'm sure it's Apple, Spotify,
You
everywhere.
just had,
Yeah.
I don't know if that was
I'm the
recent,
pink
but
one.
you,
There's someone else who took Fertility Friday, which is weird after, I guess after a decade, whatever, it's free for all.
yeah.
But the pink one.
Okay.
I saw you had Jolene Brighton on there, and I love
Yeah,
her.
I watched your stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
You had her on? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
I've had her on, and she had me on recently. I flew to Mexico
Awesome.
City. That was
Okay.
fun.
Yeah, I
I'll
love
have to
that.
look at that.
Thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate this was a really, I mean, this conversation, I mean, we could have gone 1,000 different directions on this thing. Um, right, I mean, we could have gone so many places with
Mhm.
this that would have been relevant. I love the cultural conversation around it. That's very interesting to me.
Totally.
Especially I'm 49, Grace 29. You're the same way age as my wife. It's so interesting to see the differences and even some things you said when you're like, whatever happened to condoms? I'm like, yeah, things like dinosaurs. Like whatever happened with birth control? It was obvious when you said it. I'm like, well, duh.
Make condoms great
Great
again.
again,
I'm
yeah.
Canadian, so I'm not into
Yeah,
politics.
yeah.
I'm just saying, make condoms
Yeah.
great again.
Thank you very much for coming on, and
Yes.
hopefully we'll talk soon again.
Thank you
for
so
having me.
much.
Thank you.